Hearing this, Aster bristled. Are you cursing me to never get married? Ellie spoke calmly. You eat together every day. You look so sweet. What's the problem? She patted Aster's shoulder, looking confident. Just let me know when you need me. I'll help you ruin Sir Mio's marriage prospects. Hearing this, Aster glanced at Mio. Although the suggestion was very tempting, he liked Yuga. If he married him, he might end up like Queen Faye. Currently, Ellie mainly took care of the little prince during the day, while Aster was responsible for the night, so Aster kept brainwashing the maids. He could guess what the maid would do next. How miserable this queen was. The young and powerful king fell in love with an extremely handsome man. If anything happened to either of them, there wouldn't be enough people to care for the little prince, so the head maid added another helper. But when they saw Anna, they shook their heads repeatedly. The little prince was very shy around Anna, so they had to teach Anna how to take care of children while also tending to the increasingly demanding little prince. It was exhausting. Just then, Serja asked Astor when she would be taking a break. He could accommodate her free time. Hearing this, Astor suddenly perked up as if injected with adrenaline. She excitedly jumped up from the sofa, repeatedly confirming if Serja would really accompany her that day. She planned to take a day off when the expeditionary force entered the city, as the first day would be the grandest and most meaningful. After they made the arrangement, Serja left, and so the 5-day countdown began. Aster was instantly energized and full of life. She entrusted the little prince to Sir Mio, instructing him to feed the prince milk to stimulate his appetite. Then, saying she'd be right back, she rushed out in a flurry, leaving a bewildered Meow behind. What's it like when your friend is more excited about your date with a man than you are? It was late at night. Aster rushed into the bedroom. In a whirlwind, she pulled up her 2 sleeping maid companions. She shouted, I'm really in a hurry, wake up, while shaking them. Any treasure in the world was nothing compared to having each other in their eyes. Aster painted it's a big deal. In 5 days, I'm gonna watch the parade, but I have nothing to wear. Her 2 friends yawned, casually responding, just for what you have now. It's fine to be ordinary. But Astra said, I'm going with a man. Hearing this, the 2's pupils dilated, instantly filled with fighting spirit. Quick, bring out all your clothes. Don't you have anything other than these funeral-worthy outfits? Astra waved her hand helplessly. I only have these clothes, that's why I'm asking for your help. Her friends are puzzled. Don't you have any family? What did you do with your salary if not buy clothes? Learning that the original owner was an orphan in this situation was truly heartbreaking. Then the 2 hurriedly dragged Aster, striding towards the door. With the help of many maids, Aster finally gathered many clothes and accessories before a day off. She finally chose Surface teardrop earrings, Jessie's orange dress, and Mina's lace shawl. Early in the morning, Pepe carefully did Aster's hair, and Anna applied all her makeup skills on Aster's face. Finally, she was ready to go out. Aster was moved to tears by everyone's kindness. Just then, Mio, holding the little prince's hand, pointed at Aster and said with a hint of jealousy, your nanny hasn't taken good care of you for days because she's preparing for her date. He continued rambling, I'll keep reminding him about you going on a date and leaving him before he's even 100 days old until he's 20. Aster wasn't flustered at all, but rather smug. I'll help you too if you ever go on a date. He desperately wished for someone to appear with a walkie-talkie, telling him to leave as an outsider. Many people were moved by the beautiful love between the king and the man. The king wanted to give everything to the man, but he couldn't give him the position of queen. Oh, by the way, all right, no one switched shifts with you, right? Want to copy my suggestion letter? At this moment, Anna suddenly asked Sir Mio, aren't you going to get ready? Both of them looked puzzled. The female lead was all dressed up for a date, yet someone was calling for Mio to get ready. It turned out everyone thought Astor was going out with Mio. Because in their view, Mio was the only man Astor usually interacted with. She usually met Sir Seiya on the early hours, so even Ellie, her closest friend, had never seen him. Astor described that she was going on a date with someone else, a gentle, kind, and trustworthy man. The entire royal city was very lively, a scene of peace and harmony. The parade was about to begin. Aster accidentally bumped into a man next to her. Seeing this, Sir Seiya gently pulled her clothes. They stood close together, which was a bit safer. This action captured Aster's heart. She thought Sir Seiya was just handsome like an elf, but didn't expect him to be so manly when protecting someone. Suddenly, flower petals rained down from the sky, and the crowd instantly became excited. Their love faced a huge obstacle. The queen was the king's fiancée, copyright Easton's childhood. The city gate creaked open. The 2 were squeezed out of shape in the massive crowd. Actually, this war could be said to have achieved nothing. The king and ministers feared the people would feel uneasy, so they tried every means to make the entry ceremony as festive as possible. The knights entered, leading them was Klein. It was said he was seriously injured, but he seemed to deliberately hide it as it wasn't visible at all. After New, he was one of the characters who appeared after the war ended. He was the king's confidant and the country's pride as a top military commander. Although he strongly opposed the war initially, he couldn't overcome the king's firm attitude. He could only shoulder the role of general and go to war, only returning now. Although he didn't contribute much to the escape ritual, it was because of his presence by the king's side that Yuga's followers didn't act rashly. After this war ended, that person also returned. He was the great mage Sil, who could command the entire continent. At the little prince's naming ceremony, he was the one who offered blessings to the king and the little prince. But after the war, he suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. In the novel, there's a story about how Yuga helped Sil overcome his trauma. Aster curiously looked around, but everyone was wearing armor. It was impossible to tell who was who. The parade was in progress. Aster in the crowd was trying to find out what the characters from the novel looked like, but Aster hadn't paid much attention when reading the novel, so her memory seemed to be faulty. Her child was destined to be the heir to the throne, but as the female lead of the story, she could only live her life according to the setting. One thing was certain, among these people must be Saron, the one who caused the queen's family to fall. Although he hadn't fallen for Yugi yet, but in the future, he would offer his heart to Yuga. After all, he was also an unfortunate account. The brief parade ended. Serja politely asked Astor what she wanted to eat. Astor only said she wanted something spicy, but in her heart she was crying rivers. She missed instant noodles and the taste of fried chicken and rice sausages. But even if she said that, no one would understand. The two arrived at the restaurant together. Cersei let Astor, who could now read, order the food. Astor picked up the menu, reading out some unfamiliar dishes. He was shocked. He seemed to understand, but what was actually written? Why did it sound like a spell when read aloud? So in the end, C ended up ordering the food. Aster listened, lost in thought with a knife and fork. This action puzzled Sia. Aster looked at her own hands. The part of myself I see most is in my face, it's my hands, so lately I've been wanting to hurt these hands to wake myself up. Now when I open my eyes in the morning, I can't even tell who I am before I start thinking about what work I need to do today. She was even confused. Did Mom wash the clothes I put in the washing machine the day before yesterday? On the way out, do I eat a vegetable sandwich or? Whenever I think of these things, I want to wake myself up, face reality, and stop thinking about the past. Facing Seiya's puzzled expression, Aster could only smile and say she just wanted to remind herself to live earnestly today as well. The poor queen not only entered the palace without a coronation ceremony, but also lost her palace, symbolizing her status because the king's lover said, "The queen's palace is really beautiful." Seiya sensed that Aster was hiding something. He untied his hairband and tied a bow for Aster. He gently comforted her. When you want to wake yourself up, look at the bow together instead of a wound. It would be better. This gesture warmed Aster's heart. Such a gentle and considerate Cersei was hard not to love. The female lid and Cersei watched the parade on their date. After dining, the two wanted the square to buy gifts. Suddenly, Aster noticed the fountain in the middle of the square. Mio had said before that when he thought of Yuga, it felt like a fountain constantly gushing in his heart. What kind of feeling was that exactly? Aster curiously asked, what do you men buy when you come to places like this? Seiya said, men and women aren't that different while buying a bouquet of flowers for Aster. Actually, we all come to buy things that make people happy. It was a pleasant day today. Aster hummed a tune all the way back to the palace carrying a basket. When she opened the door, Mio's resentful face suddenly appeared. She was deprived of her symbolic palace, and just because of one sentence, I envy the queen for being able to attend events with the king. She was forbidden to attend. In the darkness, it startled Aster, making her cry out. She exclaimed that her poor heart couldn't take it, remembering that in the past, whenever she stayed out overnight, her father would wait in the living room. For a moment, she thought it was him. Aster hurriedly changed the subject, saying, Sir Mio, I bought you a cake. Let's eat together. Actually, this was bought with money borrowed from Sir Seiya. Until now, Aster still didn't know where the original owner had hidden her money. Mio looked unhappy. I don't eat sweets. Don't you know that? Oh no, she stepped on a landmine again. Aster could only hurriedly cover for herself. Then next time I'll buy you flowers. What flowers do you like? Mio directly refused. I don't want anything. Hearing this, Aster silently complained in her heart. If he had added just having you as enough, I might have fallen for him. Aster couldn't help but be narcissistic. does he like me? He just hasn't realized it himself. Otherwise, why would he make such a sour face when he sees me going on a date with Saya? She thought she could live a peaceful life after moving to a separate palace. But looking at Mio's frowning, displeased expression, she felt she was overthinking. Mio sighed and asked, did you have fun today? Aster's eyes lit up, excitedly talking nonstop. Today's grand parade was like a real celebration. Mio smiled insincerely and started complaining to the little prince. Your nanny only cares about having fun herself, not thinking about you at all. Just as he was about to leave, he stopped. There's something I've been wanting to say since this morning. Orange doesn't suit you at all. He then snorted coldly and left with its sunder face, looking like a jealous little wife. Indeed, a girl's wardrobe always lacks one suitable piece of clothing. That day, Aster received a notice. The emperor wanted her to bring the little prince to attend the ceasefire commemoration party. For her, this was terrifying. She was just an insignificant little maid, yet she had to attend a party. She had already imagined several scenes of palace intrigue. Suddenly, Eli calmly said, you're done for. You don't have any clothes to wear tomorrow. Aster's face darkened. She had forgotten about this. The next day, Aster and Mio brought the little prince to attend the party. While waiting, Aster couldn't help feeling sad. The queen must be the last person in the palace to know the prince's name. Then she said to the little prince, do you know, your mother originally wanted to name you Yuzhen. Isn't that name cool? Although she couldn't change anything, at least she could let him know this name. Mio looked thoughtful. The three were called to the party venue. In the empty room behind, they needed to wait in advance. But she was confined just for encountering the king and his lover during a walk. Aster, completely disregarding her image, sat on the floor against the wall. Mio reminded her that sitting in such a place would dirty her clothes, but Astor didn't care. No one would look at her anyway. Mio was still the Esta examining here. This outfit suits you better than the dress from a few days ago. Astor smiled and agreed that orange-red indeed didn't complement my skin tone. She was crying rivers inside. This one was made by her sisters who stayed up all night, wanting the original owner buy some clothes. Hearing this, Mio muttered to himself, that dress wasn't that bad looking. To prevent others from seeing Aster sitting on the ground, Mio silently stood in front of her. Just like a knight, after a while, Mio gently patted Aster's shoulder to wake her up. It was time for the little prince to make his entrance. The king and Hugo were standing on the stage. Aster knelt and handed the little prince to the king. Then the prince was lifted up. The king made a declaration under known blessings and unknown protection. This child was born. He will become the heir to the throne and has bestowed the name Calgrins. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, the party officially began. How cruel this man was, he kept mocking the female lead's ugly appearance. The post-war celebration party was in progress. Suddenly, Yuga, holding the little prince, walked up to Aster. After giving the child to Astor, he smiled, patted Astor's shoulder, and leaned close to her. He whispered, even when you dress up, you're not that pretty, huh? Hearing this, Astor wanted to see Sermio's reaction beside her, but she found him staring straight at Yuga, infatuated. Even the child she struggled to give birth to was taken away by the man. Astor was furious inside, although I'm not the type of beauty who'd be scouted on the street. No one has ever said I'm ugly. Why does he always bring up my appearance? But no matter how unhappy she was inside, she had to appear calm and pleasant on the surface. Perhaps you're too beautiful, sir. Someone of my appearance doesn't meet your standards. You guys sighed deeply helpless. Although you indeed don't look good, your mouth is pleasing, I'll let you off today. Suddenly, you guys smiled brightly, his whole body radiating light. He said, actually, I quite like you too. His flowing golden hair and charming smile instantly made the crowd go wild. Everyone was intoxicated, but Astor alone felt chills down her spine. The party continued. Astor was watching over the little prince nearby. She recalled the novel's plot. In 3 years, Prince Carl would leave the queen's side. Aster's thoughts were interrupted by the noisy discussions around her. This new nanny looks so young, she seems unmarried or perhaps a widow. I heard she was personally appointed by His Majesty. Perhaps she has some connection with him. Although she's nothing now, her future power shouldn't be underestimated. Being so young, lower-ranking nobles might personally approach her. It could be a good investment. In such circumstances, anyone would turn evil. But sadly, until the queen died of illness, she maintained her kind and virtuous nature. Suddenly, a viscount walked out from the crowd. He introduced himself as Asna and asked for the female lead's name. Aster wasn't arrogant, but she wasn't naive enough to miss such simple calculations. Currently, King Carl's only heir was Prince Carl, and she was the prince's most trusted nanny, still an unmarried young woman. Although now just a quasi-noble, such a young woman with nothing could become the core of power in 20 years. So they definitely wanted to win her over. Aster lifted her skirt and gracefully answered the question, Viscount, my name is similar to yours. I'm called Askane, this man I call him the Sunderragelessy King. The nobles at the party were discussing among themselves. The suddenly appeared Viscount Asna deeply invited Aster to dance with him. Before Aster could react, Mio grabbed her arms. Pulling her behind him, he said, Excuse me, she's the prince's nanny. Like me, she can't leave this place. The Viscount, rejected on her behalf, was embarrassed and sweating profusely. He could only slink away. Aster peeked at Mio and couldn't help but smile. At this moment, he was like her knight coming to her rescue. Aster thanked Mio with a bright smile. In the future, if there are noble ladies you don't like clinging to you, just let me know. Mio looked confused. Aster tilted her head and continued, I'll help spread rumors that you have an illegitimate child. Clearly, this was a mischievous suggestion. Seeing the playful Aster, Mio wasn't angry, just helplessly sighed. Aster now felt his head buzzing. He had actually transmigrated into this novel. Logically speaking, if he were the protagonist, he would just need to follow the original storyline to complete the task of returning. At this moment, the crowd began to stir because Count Klein had arrived. Everyone consciously parted to both sides. He was the country's top military commander and King Aegis' strongest weapon. The king suddenly stood up and joyfully rushed towards him, but Klein fell to his knees with a thud. Your subject is guilty, I couldn't return victorious. With these words, everyone fell silent, especially the king, who instantly turned to stone. Aster inwardly exclaimed how amazing this was. The king had spent so much money and effort to cover up the fact that they hadn't won the war, yet the person involved just said it outright. The next second, you can step forward and grasp Klein's hand, trying to smooth things over. Your safe return is a victory for all of us. Undoubtedly, such a smile and gentle words once again captured the hearts of the nobles present, but Klein remained expressionless. He yanked his hand away, not wanting to deal with him at all. The king, fearing Yoga would be hurt, immediately took his hand. Then he continued, That's right. Count Klein's contributions are undeniable. He can be said to be our country's second treasure. Then he planted a loving kiss on Yoga's hand. Without even thinking, the king's first treasure must be Yoga. Seeing this scene, Astor felt nauseated. The king appointed Klein as the prince's guardian, proving his trust and friendship. This decision further intertwined his fate with Astor's. He murmured Astor's name. Astor, also seeing Klein, felt her heart skip a beat. He prayed internally, hoping this was just a dream if it wasn't a film shoot. But he was just an insignificant character. He was devastated. Does he have to wait until the queen dies to return? At this moment, fear occupied her mind. Did the original owner know him? Perhaps this body wasn't just an ordinary commoner. Otherwise, how could she know such an important figure? Her hands trembled uncontrollably. While deep in thought, she was startled by Mio. Mio asked curiously, though I don't know much about women's clothes, isn't it strange to pair a black dress with a black ribbon? After learning it was Circea's choice, Mio got jealous. He criticized you wearing long sleeves is really ordinary. Astrafil annoyed, he just said it looked good and now he's changing his mind. He muttered quietly, I don't think much of your taste either. The party was in full swing. Suddenly the bright ballroom turned pitch black. It was impossible to see one's hand in front of their face. The door suddenly opened and a tinkling sound was heard. The great magician Hill walked in from outside. Everyone immediately began to discuss. Originally, with a great magician participating, victories seemed assured, but he had never experienced war before. On his first battlefield, he saw comrades dying all around him, unable to bear the mental anguish. He fled from the troops, causing a huge shock and shadow over the kingdom. Hill came to apologize. Today was the joyous day of announcing the kingdom's heir. Although he was a deserter, he was still the great magician who established the continent's laws, so he came to bless the young prince. Just then his roommate Mina asked with concern, What's wrong today? Although Aster really wanted to say, Who am I? He was afraid of raising suspicion. After receiving the king's permission, he quickly walked towards the young prince. He would receive the authority. In the future, he could fulfill one earnest wish, then he'll use magic to inscribe a mark. A strong light illuminated the entire ballroom. Aster, being closest, instantly had her vision blurred. In the darkness, she was grabbed by a large hand and pulled outside, but even though she couldn't see clearly, that red hair was still dazzling. That's right, it was Klein. The male lead finally interacted with the female lead. In the pitch-black ballroom, Klein took advantage of the chaos to pull Aster out. Only Sir Mio noticed Aster's departure. After running for a while, Aster was panting heavily. She gasped for air. What are you doing? Klein didn't answer. Instead, he asked very puzzled. Why are you here? Aster didn't know how to answer. What was the relationship between Klein and the original owner? How familiar were they? Should she respond respectfully or like an old friend? This was completely different from guessing the plot by observing expressions. He could only say that it was his first time seeing childbirth, and he was a bit scared. This man had an eerie aura. He might kill her. She must survive and return. Suddenly, Astra countered, am I not allowed to be here? Indeed, the best defense is offense. Seeing Astor's unexpectedly strong attitude, Klein was stunned at first. But then he became flustered and pitiful. I was worried about you. Seeing this reaction, Astor knew she was on the right track. Could she be a princess from a neighboring country or Klein's sister? Klein anxiously asked, did that person drive you out? Hearing this, Astor had already imagined a grand drama. A selfish father had a child with a maid, then abandoned his daughter and drove her out. So the brother who finally found his sister would say such lines. Astor's eyes lit up overjoyed. Her transmigration journey finally had an identity and revenge plot. However, the next second client said, if that's the case, let me take you to my home. You must stay in a safe place. Astor instantly deflated like a puncture balloon. I'm not his sister. Indeed, my life is no plot twist. Astor stated that she had already been appointed as the young prince's nanny by the emperor, but Klein anxiously said he would find a way to handle this. What kind of relationship did the original owner have with him to make this person so loyal to the king? Consider rebellion. Astor asked curiously, do you want me to leave the royal palace? Klein just hoped she could stay safely by his side forever. Astor instinctively asked, are we that kind of relationship? This fierce man in front of her actually had such a puppy-like side. Suddenly, Mina held her hand, comforting her, it's okay, we were all born that way. Kindness was the only buff Astor possessed through Mina. Astor asked Klein about their relationship. Hearing this, Klein's entire demeanor deflated. He looked extremely disappointed. Astor was screaming internally, why did he look so hurt? I genuinely didn't know, that's why I asked. Astor wanted to step forward to explain and comfort him. But she accidentally stepped on her dress, losing her balance. Klein hadn't noticed the situation. He was talking to himself, you are my precious Astor, crying profusely. It seemed like he was about to say something important, but sorry, save me first. Astor was seen falling into the sea with a splash. The huge impact made her instantly lose consciousness. The next second, Klein jumped in after her without hesitation, when Klein pulled the unconscious Astor out of the water. Sir Mio suddenly appeared. With a cold expression, he sternly said, hand her over to me. When Astor opened her eyes in a daze, she found Mio gently comforting the nearly crying Prince Carl. Now he could only pretend to be the original Astor and gather some information. After Mina left, she looked through the original Astor's belongings. Mio also noticed that Astor was about to wake up. He reached out to cover her eyes, letting her sleep a bit longer. The next morning, Astor felt like a rotten rag smelling awful all over. She looked at Mio resentfully. How could you throw a soaking wet person onto the bed? Mio panicked a bit and retorted, I didn't throw you on it. Astor angrily started being unreasonable. I mean, you should have changed my clothes. Mio quickly moved to stop her. He continued speaking. The maids were off duty. No one could change your clothes. Sir Saya also tried to smooth things over. You couldn't expect Sir Mio to change your clothes, right? He spoke while keeping his distance, laughing awkwardly. Let's end today's lesson here. The prince also doesn't seem to be feeling well. Astra looked down in confusion. She found the little prince frowning, almost crying from the smell. After taking a bath, Astra asked Mio how she got back yesterday. Mio didn't answer. Instead, he asked about her relationship with Klein. Do you know what too many wolves, too little meat means? Mio was jealous, inquiring about Astra and Klein's relationship. But now Astra wanted to know even more than him. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. 3 young knights with bright smiles walked in. They were just appointed as the little prince's guards today. After the 3 knights introduced themselves, Astor was very confused. There were only 2 music boxes, a pen, and some jewelry and cosmetics. In the end, she couldn't find a way to understand the original Astor. She hadn't heard about this, but when she learned it was the king's order, she instantly accepted it. After all, she herself was parachuted in, and except for Mio, who volunteered, the rest were forcibly assigned from above. Astor displayed her professional fake smile. After some conversation, she learned they would be rotating shifts with Mio. They were all from the Knight Order, so they were basically commoner knights. Astor didn't expect the king to so blatantly appoint knights of common birth as the prince's guards. Although Astor felt very displeased thinking about the king's intentions, the gazes around her now were terrifyingly intense. Too many wolves, too little meat. These marriage-hungry maids were staring at the young knights like hungry wolves. Suddenly, Astor's eyes lit up. She asked with a grin, "Do you have girlfriends?" The three knights instantly felt a sense of fear. They could only use smiles to hide their awkwardness. It seems they've entered a wolf's den. A few days later, after learning about the knights' situations, Astor excitedly told Ellie, "There's some good news I can let you have first." She looked at the three knights. None of them have girlfriends. "Which one do you want?" the three whispered among themselves. Ellie liked younger men, while Anna liked handsome, rich men with good bodies. Astor couldn't help but sigh. That's quite demanding, as expected of the most beautiful maid in the queen's palace. With Anna's conditions, there was no need to worry. It seems she could arrange to repay debts to Pepe and save. A few days passed. Since the prince was born, the king never visited the queen's palace again. Indeed, it wasn't a simple matter. Suddenly, Astor struck up a conversation with Miot beside her. With the increase in staff, Miot could now take shifts off. He rarely showed a smile. Astor cheered internally. Great, he seems to be in a good mood. Since a few days ago, after returning from watching the parade with Circea, he had been looking displeased. He couldn't have thought I was slacking off, right? Astor hadn't considered the possibility that Miot might be jealous. This is the man I find most controversial, wavering between liking the female lead and the male supporting character. Astor shaking out blankets on the balcony. Saw Miot leaving alone to attend the last day of the festival. She felt somewhat touched, like watching a shut-in's rehabilitation training. She inexplicably wanted to cry. However, that night, Miot bribed other maids to cover Astor's shift. Then he dragged a confused Astor away. They arrived at the festival together. The bustling market atmosphere made Astor's eyes light up. This was the night market she had always wanted. Everything was sparkling. She excitedly tugged at Miot's clothes, not knowing where to start exploring. Bubbles' fears floated in the air. But his lover, Yuga, often lingered at the palace gates. It was said he came in once yesterday but left quickly. She reached out like a child, wanting to touch them but couldn't reach due to her height limitation. Seeing this, Miot helped her. When the bubble sphere burst, Astor laughed happily. She grinned, "You came back to pick me up. You must have found it born to shop alone, right? We've raised a child together for a month. How have we developed deep feelings? I'm quite popular, you know," Miot said with a hint of jealousy. "That's true, you were indeed very popular at the party that day. But no matter what, you and I are in this together." Astor mused, "That's something I often say. At first, you wouldn't even listen. Looks like indoctrination education is quite effective." Then the two began their lovely date. Astor ran joyfully. She suspected she must have been a crow in her past life, loving shiny things so much. There were too many people at night. She accidentally tripped as she fell rapidly, struggling desperately. Miot anxiously embraced her from behind. He whispered in her ear, "I just told you, you'll fall if you run so hastily." But Astor didn't care. She giggled and pushed his hands away. "I just heard there's a fireworks show today." Although everyone felt it was strange, no one expected things to develop so seriously. Then she walked straight into a store. Miot muttered to himself, "I knew you'd like the fireworks show." It was obvious he had specifically brought Astor to see it. But Astor was already attracted by the dazzling array of goods before her, not hearing what he said. You see, Astor didn't intend to buy anything, thinking there was nothing she liked. But actually, it was because she had no money. On the surface, she could only say, "Souvenirs like these end up in boxes, never to be taken out again. You had to agree, then I won't buy anything either." But he was examining the jewelry in the box. Seeing this, Astor said, "There probably isn't anything suitable for that person among these accessories. Why does the female lead feel sorry for this man?" The two browsed the store together. Miot, however, was carefully examining the items in the jewelry box. Astor thought he was going to give it to the king's lover, Yuga. Although these were all beautiful, the perfect item Miot wanted probably didn't exist. Because he loved Yuga, no treasure in this world would shine as brightly as when Yuga wore it. Miot ignored what Astor said and directly bought the shiny moon bracelet from the jewelry box. Astor felt a bit sorry for him on her own. He bought a gift he couldn't give, and it seemed cheap and inferior for Yuga. After browsing the store, Astor drooled over the street food. Although Miot felt helpless, he indulged her and bought it for her. Miot reached out his hand to Astor. Astor naturally placed her hand in his. The two ate skewers while holding hands. Suddenly, Miot realized the fireworks show was about to begin. Early in the morning, the emperor personally brought many soldiers to the queen's palace. He led Astor to a perfect spot to watch the fireworks. Actually, he had specially scouted this location during the day. Huge fireworks bloomed in the sky. Startling Astor, Miot noticed her fear. He gently reassured her the fireworks are far from us. It's safe here. Aster felt his thoughtfulness and smiled happily. Mio asked Aster shyly, didn't you want to visit the night market before? How was it? He looked like he wanted to be praised. Today's experience deeply moved Aster. The novel didn't describe many characters in detail. Whether it was Aster or Mio, their lives were beyond the book. Although this fireworks show wasn't as grand as those in her world, and the close proximity made her afraid. Even so, it made her feel truly alive now. She gave me a genuine smile. I'm very happy. At the same time in the Queen's palace, Klein had been sitting there waiting for a store for hours. The serious atmosphere made all the maids and servants too afraid to make a sound. The sudden creaking sound of a chair moving startled them all. Klein, who had waited in vain, stood up expressionlessly. The next moment, a maid beside him pushed him, saying, Aster, what are you doing? Hurry and bring some hot water. The king brought a group of soldiers to the Queen's palace, where she was still in confinement. He arrested all the maids who were loyal to the Queen. He was seething inside. He threw the carefully prepared bouquet on the ground and strode away. He had accidentally worn the clothes of the man he lived with. That day, Astra asks her Saya what to do if she unintentionally stood up a nobleman. Saya replied, if you don't have any feelings for that person, then it's their fault. It has nothing to do with you. Astra continued explaining that Count Klein had come, but she was off that day and couldn't meet him. She didn't know how to see him again. Astra remembered the day she returned from watching the fireworks with Mio. She saw a bunch of daffodils and a letter on the table. She thought it was a challenge letter from someone and was terrified. After some thought, Saya said, you're the prince's wet nurse. It would be good to formally greet Count Klein, the prince's guardian. Perhaps you could send an invitation. Astra looked at Saya with admiration. Teacher, this has been bothering me for so long. You came up with a solution right away. You're a genius. So Saya suddenly grinned. Then you should write the invitation. Astra immediately turned gloomy and wet, lamenting that she was someone who only scored 20 points in writing, yet had to write an invitation. The next moment, Sergio reminded Astra that there was a Knight's Order emblem on her collar and she should change clothes. Astra looked down and was shocked. Now one of the clothes felt so big. She angrily shouted at Mio, I've told you so many times not to mix our clothes. Mio casually retorted, the room is so small, and besides, who told you not to check properly when you put on clothes? Just because they didn't show respect to the king's lover, Yuga. The king wouldn't spare anyone who might threaten Yuga, so he often barged into the queen's palace looking for trouble. Sai was at a loss for words. He wondered if they even wanted to hide the fact that they were living together. He looked at Astor, thinking this girl was truly unique. She could even turn a rigid knight into what he was now. Looking at the homework in his hand, he found it strange. Astor didn't know how to spell it all, yet she knew how to write. She didn't know what the characters were, but the order was almost correct. Saya was very interested in this intriguing girl and proposed to visit her room to see what writing tools she had. At this moment, Astor and Mio suddenly realized their living together might be exposed. They instantly reached an agreement. They said the room was too messy and it was improper to visit a lady's private chamber. Sir Saya saw through it but didn't say anything, just smiled lightly. A few days later, Astor received a reply from Klein. How should one live after transmigrating into a maid without the original's memories? Astor had sent an invitation to Klein. The reply said he would come in 2 days. And aside, he's really handsome, just a bit scary. Astor's face had turned ashen. He's not just scary, what if he has a hobby of killing people? If I lied to him, I might be skinned alive. Should I tell him now that I have amnesia? The more Astor thought about it, the dizzier she felt. She was so nervous she felt like throwing up. She lay on the table, staring blankly at the daffodils Klein had brought. He chose to come see me again. It seems the original owner meant a lot to that man. Could I be his ex-girlfriend? What if he notices something's wrong? After the king left, the maids discussed heatedly. Will he draw his sword on the spot? Astor had already imagined her fate. She might be taken for a black magician in disguise or be executed as a spy from another country. Now she had only one thought in her mind. She must survive and return. The next day, Klein came to the queen's palace dressed up meticulously. Astro saw he was holding white flowers again. She thought he must like pure women. Astro muttered to herself, there are no such women in the queen's palace. You should go back quickly. However, the next moment Klein approached, extended his hand and invited, how about a walk with me before the prince wakes up? The radiance emanating from his whole body was so dazzling that it was impossible to refuse. After hesitating for a moment, Astor placed her hand in his. Klein was very satisfied with her reaction. He immediately grasped her hand tightly and was about to walk out. Aster felt strange. She should have been panicking, but she felt all her previous worries were unnecessary. Now she wasn't afraid at all. She might regret it later, but at this moment she just wanted to follow her heart. When they reached the door of the room, Klein suddenly stopped. He glared coldly at Mio behind them, rivals meeting, eyes red with jealousy. It was like a scene from hell. Do they want us to say welcome to that vixen? For a store who had just transmigrated, it was clear that the king indeed wanted everyone to do that. When they arrived at the courtyard, Aster let go of his hand and kept her distance. It was you, Count, who saved me that day. I've always wanted to thank you. This formal address left Klein bewildered. You didn't call me that before. Aster's face darkened. She thought this topic would be the safest, but she had stepped on a landmine so quickly. Now she was in trouble. Can you imagine that she was actually a relic to the male lid? Aster was pulled out by Klein, but her unfamiliar address made him suspect her identity. Aster could only say firmly, things are different now from before. Please accept reality. Klein clearly hesitated for a moment. Then he changed the subject. You haven't answered me. Why are you here? Aster still didn't know what relationship the original owner had with him. But no matter what, he was a dangerous person. The original owner's life might have included Klein, but one thing was clear, he wasn't part of my life. Aster's words were resolute. I am the prince's wet nurse. The count is the prince's guardian. Let the past be the past. However, Klein's expression turned gloomy. I can't do that. I thought we both valued each other, but it seems that's not the case. Even so, I won't give up. Then he said something troubling with a red face and sincere expression. Although it was unfair to the queen to survive, they should just do these small things. Aster smiled brightly at Yuga and asked, is there anything I can help with? You are now my only precious relic. Hearing the word relic, Aster's eyes widened like copper bells. Her face was full of confusion, doubting her existence. She had considered so many possibilities, but never thought she wouldn't even count as a person. Klein muttered to himself, you and I are both his relics, the future of remembering him. Aster was unable to accept this. Since coming to this world, she had always fantasized about finding true love. Although she had no expectation for the man in front of her, she never thought she would end up being just an object. Aster wept bitterly. Even taking a huge step back, she had never been married, so how could she be a widow? It was indeed better to stay away from this man. Aster spoke ambiguously, I miss him too, but now the little prince can't do without me. Klein asked Aster, puzzled, is he really that precious to you? Come to think of it, the prince wasn't her own child. He was just a burden forced upon her one day. When he doesn't drink milk, it's annoying. When he cries and doesn't sleep, she feels like throwing him out. She definitely couldn't like the prince, but when she thinks of the smile he shows her. Perhaps one day he might become precious to her. After some thought, Aster smiled decline and firmly said, I am the prince's wet nurse. The few months of part-time work as a call center agent weren't for nothing. Even if you can't see the face, you must keep smiling. The tone should be patient and extremely respectful. Have you ever seen someone so deeply in love? Aster used the little prince as a reason to refuse Klein's request to take her away. Hearing this, Klein pondered for a moment and made a decision. He knelt on one knee and made a heartfelt promise. That person is now in a country fading into twilight, so I can't give you his vows, but I will use a knight's honor to guarantee you to protect you and the prince. Aster was puzzled. Why did he have to go to such lengths? She couldn't help but ask, can you really protect me? Klein firmly stated that he had already been to the battlefield for Aster, and he wouldn't hesitate to pay the price of his life. Aster seemed to be somewhat moved. She had never had someone like a knight in her life. Could the man before her really be trusted? Could her precarious transmigration life end at this moment? She wanted to reach out in response, but suddenly withdrew. If she accepted him, wouldn't the original story change? Just as Astor was hesitating, Yuga suddenly appeared from the side. He quickly stepped forward and grasped Klein's hand. Get up quickly, you'll dirty your white clothes. Klein looked at him with disdain and slapped his hand away. He stood up without saying a word. The current positioning made Aster feel her stress index was off the charts. After all, she couldn't afford to offend either of them. They just talked over Aster. Yuga carefully expressed the king's longing for Klein and invited him to come to his palace to see the king. Klein was speechless. He couldn't stay here for another moment. The looks from other maids behind her, as if looking at a lunatic, were truly heartbreaking. Yuga was very satisfied with Aster's attitude. After asking for her name, he said, I want to see the child. He ignored Yuga, only briefly saying goodbye to Aster before leaving. Now Aster was extremely embarrassed. She could imagine how displeased Yuga was. She was too scared to turn around. Sure enough, Yoga's words were full of sarcasm, saying Aster's methods were impressive. Then he pinched Aster's chin, examining her left and right. You look ordinary with no personality, you have no charm to speak of. I really don't understand what caught the attention of Klein. Count Kara, Aster was a bit annoyed. This person's words were really unpleasant, how hateful this man was. After Klein left, Yoga leaned into Aster, saying how someone so ordinary could gain Klein's favor. Aster couldn't stand it anymore and retorted, I'm not ugly either. Yoga looked Aster up and down. If you were ugly, at least you'd have the value of being ugly. But you seem so ordinary that you have no value at all. Such words who wouldn't be angry. Yoga, looking at the recent situation, asked, Count Kara wasn't proposing to you, was he? Astor was extremely speechless, not wanting to answer, just nodding in response. Yoga was very pleased to have guessed the answer correctly. Aster loudly relayed this to the head maid. After reporting to the queen, the two came to the prince's room. He smiled and patted Astor's head like soothing a little dog. Astor knew it was fortunate that he hadn't heard her conversation with Klein just now, but being patted on the head like this was really unpleasant. A few days passed, Astor remembered she should go to the royal library to find some books on early education. The prince's identity was noble, so everything had to be done very carefully. But the king couldn't possibly arrange for another experienced wet nurse to come. Only books could solve the problem. Although Aster asked Sir Mio to borrow books, she was mercilessly refused. Aster needed to get there within an hour. She ran with all her might, constantly cursing Mio in her heart. Didn't he say it was only a 30-minute journey? How could it be so far? She was already panting heavily. She should have exercised more regularly. To shorten the time as much as possible, Aster wanted to take a straight path. He trampled across the lawn and climbed over the railing, but found it extremely high on the other side, just as he thought he was going to fall badly. He found the sensation unexpectedly soft. He had fallen into Klein's arms. Klein's cheeks flushed red as he stared at Aster and said with a grin, you almost got hurt. Aster's eyes widened in shock. Is this the legendary Princess Carrie? Even my dad has never held me like this. Klein seemed a bit embarrassed by the staring. He thoughtfully asked Aster if he was injured. Yuget gently picked up the child, greeted the baby, and touched his face. Such close proximity, such a loving gaze made Aster's heart race. He turned his head away, shyly thanking Klein. Klein was radiating with light. With a bright smile, he asked Aster, where are you going? I can carry you there like this. Klein unexpectedly caught Astor, who fell from above, and thoughtfully offered to carry him to the library. This made Astor quite embarrassed. He jumped down from Klein's arms, patting his clothes. He asked Klein where he was going. Upon learning he was heading to the Queen's palace, Astor instinctively thought he wanted to see Prince Carl and urged him to hurry as the prince was about to go to sleep. Klein's expression was extremely gentle. He took Aster's hand and said, let's meet tomorrow then. Then he placed a kiss on it. This action made Aster's face turn bright red instantly. His just calmed emotions stirred up again. He couldn't help thinking, always making my heart flutter, so suddenly my poor heart can't take it. He quickly let go of Klein's hand, turned around, and hastily fled the scene. After Aster's relentless efforts, he finally arrived at the library. He was panting heavily, looking like a creature that had just crawled out from underground, disheveled and desperate. He asked the shocked librarian, where are the books on developmental stages? With the librarian's guidance, Astor finally found in a small corner books about sensory development of 100-day-old babies, but embarrassingly, someone would sound asleep on the desk right below the books. The little prince even reached out and grabbed his finger. If a Madonna painting came to life, it would probably look like this. Aster tried to wake him up softly, but there was no response. So Aster decided to quietly take the book out. He carefully attempted to, but due to the distance, he accidentally slipped. The book fell, hitting the sleeping man directly. Aster was so nervous he was sweating profusely. The next second, the man suddenly stretched out his arm and choked Aster's neck. A sinister and terrifying aura, like a messenger from hell. Astor was terrified, thinking he might die like this. He lifted his leg and kicked the man away, then he started coughing violently. The man seemed to wake up from a deep dream, frantically saying sorry and running away in a flash. Aster, having narrowly escaped, held his aching neck and collapsed weakly on the ground. An intense fear filled his mind. Aster, who had finally borrowed the book and returned to the Queen's palace, had run all the way. It took exactly an hour and a half. He was lying on the chair, panting heavily. Suddenly, Ellie noticed the red marks and bruises on Aster's neck. Everything felt too real. Indeed, even children like good-looking people. Suddenly, the head maid glared at Aster ominously. What's it like to be the group's favorite? Aster complained to the people in the Queen's palace about encountering a pervert in the library. The marks on his neck were from being choked. Instantly, everyone was bustling about, looking for disinfectants and healing medicines. Mio was also very anxious, saying he had Scar a moving ointment in his room. Everyone gathered around, asking if he was hurt anywhere else. Seeing everyone so concerned about him, Aster felt warm inside. He thought with a grin, "This is my territory, it's safe here." The maids gave the little prince to Aster and hurriedly went to get medicine. The little prince in his arms also seemed to have a worried look, babbling incomprehensible words. All of this made him feel very gratified. But actually, what Astra wanted most now was to tell his mother that he had encountered a bad person, was hurt, and it was painful. He was very scared that night. Astra looked at the wound on his neck. He asked me if there was any medicine to remove bruises. He had heard that knights often get beaten up and have many bruises on their bodies. But Mio was quite boastful. "An excellent knight like me doesn't need that kind of medicine. I'll ask Carl tomorrow." Although it felt like self-praise, it was indeed a fact. Mio came from the Royal Guard Knights, a group full of talented individuals. Suddenly, Astra sighed to Mio. "I really hope you could marry one of the maids in the Queen's palace. Because I think you're the best groom candidates." As if saying, "How dare you bow and scrape to Yuga in the Queen's palace? Confess your guilt immediately," but Astor was just a minor character without a backstory. She only wanted to survive until she could return. Mio looked puzzled. Actually, Astor just hoped in his heart that a good man could marry his good sister. Suddenly, Astor remembered Yuga. He felt inexplicably awkward. He needed to quickly brainwash Mio to prevent him from being infatuated with Yuga anymore. The next day, as usual, Astor received a white bouquet from Klein. He complained inwardly, wondering if Klein had taken his advice that one must wear a bouquet when meeting a woman. At this moment, Klein noticed the marks on Astor's neck. He carefully reached out to touch it, full of concern in his eyes as he asked if someone had bullied him. Then he cast a suspicious glance at Mio. Astor answered the question, "If someone bullies me, will you avenge me?" How heartwarming it is to receive special treatment. Klein was distressed about Astor's injury and wanted to know the identity of the perpetrator. To seek justice for Astor, the maids who saw this scene were all crazily shipping the CP. Suddenly, Astor held Klein's hand and invited him to take a walk in the courtyard. He had considered for a long time. This world was unfamiliar and not trusting anyone was the safest option. First, pretend to be naive, grit his teeth, and go along with it. When problems arise, find ways to solve them. Perhaps he could even get the information he wanted. Astor stared at Klein and said, "I have a secret. I'm only telling you, can you keep it from me?" Klein, being specially treated, seemed very happy. A few days later, the king sent Knight Mio to specifically guard the little prince's safety, but it was obvious he was there to monitor. He readily agreed. Astor told Klein that he had lost his memory. Suddenly one day his memory became blank, he couldn't remember him at all. Although shocked, Klein believed him unconditionally. He only asked how much he had forgotten. Astor said that although he remembered his daily work, he had no memory of Klein or the lady he mentioned. He had to pretend to know Klein earlier because he was scared. Astor spoke while secretly glancing at him. Klein suddenly leaned closer, stroking Astor's face, and softly comforted him. "It's okay, even if you don't remember, you're still very important to me. I see him through you. Even if you don't remember, it doesn't mean the time we three spent together will disappear." Astor, being treated as a substitute, couldn't help but think. If I were the original person, would I be hurt by his words? He hoped the original hadn't fallen in love with this man in front of him. This man who used the sweetest and gentlest tone to say the cruelest words. Early the next morning, Mio grabbed Carl, demanding the bruise-removing ointment, threatening that if he didn't give it, he'd make him use it up in one day. Carl looked pitiful. This was a stockpile necessity, but Mio snatched it away. Astor hadn't slept all night and was completely out of it, so when Mio brought the ointment and explained how to use it, he seemed not to understand. Mio had no choice but to go the extra mile and apply the medicine for him personally. At this time, Serge also just noticed the wound on Astra's neck. After learning what had happened, he knelt on one knee, held Astra's hand, and comforted him. In the novel, as the Little Prince's knight, he loved Yuga so much that he instilled hatred for the queen and the little prince from a young age. "You must have been very scared. Is that why you couldn't sleep well? Has that person been caught?" Astra came to his senses and thanked Teacher Zhe for his concern with a bright smile. He recalled yesterday's events. If he hadn't seen wrong, that man should be the Grand Magician Hill. Astor was attacked by Grand Magician Hill in the library. He decided to take the initiative to investigate what kind of trauma Hill had suffered on the battlefield. According to the description in the escape record, he had lived in the magician's tower since childhood, like a flower in a greenhouse. He was cultivated to become a great magician. He had just left the greenhouse when he was sent to the battlefield. Although the book didn't record what he experienced after that, he developed severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Later, it was Yuga who helped him out of the shadows. Simply put, his existence was only to showcase Yuga's personal charm. In the original work, apart from describing Yuga's love story with the king, there was hardly any description of other characters. So now Astor needed to gather more information, but even Klein, who went to the battlefield with him, didn't know what had happened. Astor wanted to take the initiative to uncover the truth. He secretly came to the royal library, as expected, that was hiding in the corner sleeping. His delicate features were dazzling even when asleep. Now Mio was swearing the knight's oath, willing to protect the prince with his life. The queen arranged for Mio to stay in the room opposite the prince's and asked him to convey thanks to the king. Astor picked up a book and started a long-range attack. The king, he'll suddenly open his eyes. His magic shattered the book instantly. He angrily questioned what Astor was doing. Although Astor was a bit scared, he unwrapped the bandage on his neck, revealing the bruise. Hill instinctively seemed a bit flustered, but quickly feigned indifference as if it was nothing unusual. Seeing Astor's firm attitude demanding an explanation, he'll reach out and press his finger on Astor's neck. After a flash of light, all the bruises disappeared. Although it wasn't my intention, I'm sorry for hurting you. Then Astor rambled on, inadvertently mentioning his feelings at that time. I was very scared and in pain then. You were planning to kill me, weren't you? Hearing this, Hill's heart skipped a beat. He then staggered back a step, covering his face and trembling all over. He muttered to himself, I shouldn't hurt others. This time, Astor roughly understood the reason for his condition. Hill covered his face in extreme pain, promising to make amends, but he left hurriedly without even asking for Astor's name or identity. The child hasn't even been named yet, but you've already granted him a guardian knight. Astor couldn't help but admire the queen's character. From that day on, Astor wanted the library every day but never saw him again. But he must still be in the palace, because this is where he met Yuga and later became Yuga's fervent follower. Astor regretted not reading that part more carefully. The next day, while Astor was exercising with the little prince, Countess Kaki arrived. This man showed you what it means to be thick-skinned. The queen's sister, Countess Kaki, came to visit the little prince only 3 months after his birth. Astor saw the countess in formal attire, looking as serious as a host. He leaned forward, carefully examining the little prince with a thoughtful expression. He said what no one else dared to say, this appearance doesn't resemble either of you at all. He cautiously reached out, wanted to touch the little prince. And the prince, meeting this aunt for the first time, seemed to like her very much, smiling and grasping her hand. The atmosphere was quite lovely. Just then, the uninvited guest Yuga arrived again. At night, roommate Mina relayed to Astor that the head maid wanted her to help the wet nurse tomorrow. This arrangement made Astor an indispensable character. The two greeted each other very casually. The countess hurriedly wanted to leave. The thick-skinned Yuga, completely oblivious, even asked if he was interrupting. The countess didn't want to respond at all and didn't stop walking. Yuga called out to her. The prince would be happy to see his aunt. Please come visit him often in the future. Hearing this, the countess only turned her head to look once and left directly without giving any answer. Yuga didn't feel awkward at all. He turned and happily started playing with the little prince, expressing his desire to breastfeed him. The maids behind were extremely disgusted. Seeing this, Astor could only dissuade him, saying the little prince had just finished feeding and was very full now. Yuga looked helpless and said, then I'll come back next time. A few days later, after Astor's tireless efforts, he finally discovered the sleeping Grand Magician on a lawn. He had a mischievous smile on his face. He picked up a stone and threw it. It hit Hill squarely. He cried out in pain, clutching his buttocks. As he got up, he saw Astor pretending to be busy nearby and became very angry. He stood up abruptly and roared, "How is it you again?" Seeing his painfully stinging buttocks, Astor felt a bit guilty. But he could only change the subject. You said you would compensate me, but there's been no news, so I had to come find you. Hill sighed helplessly. Fine, how much money do you want his compensation? Astor deliberately acted coy. How much can you give me? How much do you think I'm worth? Seeing his disgusted expression, Astor felt his life was in danger and hurriedly said he was just joking. The female lead Aster replaced the injured maid, helping the wet nurse take care of the little prince. But he hoped for a favor. I hope you can leave the palace. The Grand Magician turned out to have such an adorable character setting. Aster hoped the Grand Magician could leave the palace, but his expression was clearly one of refusal. Aster couldn't understand. He could clearly return to his domain, so why insist on staying in the palace? Hill curled up, assuming a defensive posture. This place is the safest. There are other magic knights here and Count Kara. This made Aster even more confused. First, nothing should be able to threaten a Grand Magician. Secondly, the magicians in this world were set to have free spirits and dislike being constrained. The palace was also under ancient magic, which would place many restrictions on magicians, so they shouldn't like staying in the palace. But Hill was quite pretentious on the Grand Magician. No place or person can be an obstacle to me. Hearing this, Astrid made a hypothesis: if you and Count Carafat, who would win? Hill was very confident. If I'm fully conscious of. Of course I would win, Astra thought to himself. He really does have mental issues. Not wanting to argue further, he said, anyway, this is my request. I've earned quite a bit, so don't think you can just pay me off. He was very confused. Why do you insist on making me leave? Astra couldn't reveal his intention to change the original story. He could only lie, saying he didn't want to be choked again when passing by certain places. But she never imagined she would encounter such a shocking scene. The king, with a gloomy face, asked the wet nurse, I remember you came with the queen from her maiden home. Then he launched into a barrage of criticism. He became very flustered and retorted, I'm not an assassin. I've only been in the library for so long, and it's just you, another maid, and 2 librarians. Aster exclaimed, so you're a habitual offender. Hill felt very dejected. He sighed helplessly, although I don't think it's good to tell you this. Honestly, I can only sleep well in the library. Ever since I went to the battlefield, I haven't been able to sleep. As soon as I lie down, I think of the eerie screams and towering flames. And the hundreds of people dying before my eyes. I keep having that nightmare over and over. Again and again, I dream of returning to that place. It seems Hill's post-traumatic stress disorder included insomnia. It's unclear how yoga helped him alleviate. Looking like he was about to die, Astor couldn't bring himself to drive him away. He suddenly had a bold idea, as if he had made a big decision to look after the magician. That night, Astor brought the Grand Magician back to his own room, starting their cohabitation. To alleviate Hill's insomnia, Astor brought him back to his own room. Mio refused to let Hill stay here. If word got out, Astor's reputation would be ruined, but Astor couldn't leave him alone. Moreover, since experiencing the war, Hill had developed neurasthenia. He might have extreme reactions while sleeping. It would be dangerous for the prince to be near him, so Astor's arrangement was for Mio to sleep with him. Hearing this, Mio became completely dejected, signed constantly. In contrast, Hill was very happy, saying he could sleep with anyone. The wet nurse respectfully answered, Yes, your majesty. I've been serving the queen since she was little. The next moment, the king drew his sword and executed the wet nurse.